Okay. And so we do have men that are allowed to go into women's prisons. And again, like I said earlier, it has been in place for a very long time, starting under the Obama administration. Some men were quietly moved in. I had an opportunity to meet some staff at that worked there at that time. And I've just been deathly afraid to speak up and come forward. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, that AMIE ICHKAWA is the brave heart that has brought this forward, even with threats, even with many, many obstacles coming at her. She has really brought it forward. And it's important for all of us to keep an engine behind her voice and behind this all together. And today, men are allowed to even self-ID into women's prisons, meaning they just get to say, I feel like a woman, and present their case, as Amy just discussed, and are allowed to be brought in. One of the things that we are, another thing for us to realize is that there is history or herstory behind men and women being housed together in prison in the United States. And so I'm going to take you to the state of Louisiana that became a U.S. state in 1812. And prior to that, it shared hands between the UK, Spain, and France. And so between 1833 and 1861, enslaved women, American enslaved women, at least 35, that was a count that was made. Sorry. And were incarcerated. The Louisiana State Assembly thought that it was fine to move enslaved women and enslaved men together and be housed in the Louisiana State Penitentiary. This was in Baton Rouge. Sorry, somebody's trying to call in on my phone. And brought those two together. Obviously, children were produced from men and women being put together. Obviously, it was considered Black women in America at that time were considered unrapeable. So if you were an enslaved woman, it didn't even matter. And when the children came, the women were allowed to raise their children until the age of about 10, 8, 9, 10. And then after that, the children were sold on the state steps back into chattel slavery. Many of the women had received life sentences for very small crimes, sometimes big crimes, from small to large, incarcerated, children born and sold on the steps in the state of Louisiana. So there is precedent for what is happening. I just want to talk about New Jersey and Indiana for a minute. In New Jersey, inmates were, male inmates were brought into women's prisons in the state of New Jersey. And at least, as a result of that, at least 2 pregnancies came about as a result. And we are still looking to see if they ended in live births, miscarriages, or abortion. And so one male was impregnated 2 women in New Jersey. And this was recorded and have the links and references for that. And then in the state of Indiana, there is a lawsuit that's pending that says that females were sold to males by a guard. He sold the keys to their cells, and over the course of a weekend, there was a spree of men that were able to choose whoever they wanted and go into the cells, open up the cells of the females that they wanted. Women were raped, and a lawsuit is pending. This is in Indiana. So one of the things that is happening that women, we don't think like this. We don't think like predators. So we don't realize that when a law is made and it harms a population, it becomes opportunistic. So people start thinking about opportunities and how they can wedge their way in and take advantage of this now very vulnerable population, i.e. women as a sex class, with these laws that make them completely vulnerable and disallowed from speaking up and having predatory types enter. We see it in care for disabled women. You know, men are able to line up to say, oh, I want to be a caregiver now that self-ID laws are in place. And now that, you know, men are being told, hey, it's open season on women. So you have these men that took the money off their books, gave it to the guard in Indiana, and the guard sold the keys. So we have this almost brothel style. And I use this term, and it's very, you know, it's a tough term, but I say, you know, legally sanctioned rape camps, you know, because you can do anything to a woman. And then you can look at the guard and say, oh, you think you're going to do something about it? All I have to do is call you transphobic. And you're going to shiver and shake in your boots. You're going to worry about your pension. You're going to be scared to lose your salary. You're going to be scared to be doxxed. So nobody's saying anything. In fact, they turn around and blame a woman and tell her she's a bad girl and her that she's transphobic, the actual victim of this horrific situation. And on in terms of, you know, Western hemisphere, Western culture, other nations, I'll talk about Canada very briefly. You know, women have been petitioning their parliament to stop the placement of men and women prison. We have Heather Mason that speaks about this extensively and in details. Wonderful to know that Heather and AMIE are connected. It's just fantastic. And, you know, brave souls that can write about what's going on are talking about how gender identity is prioritized over sex and endangering female prisoners. And more and more and more people, regular, everyday people, are becoming aware, not just a few faces in California, not just the growing numbers of Californians, but also across the United States. And we're realizing what's happening to our sisters in other nations. And another thing that I want to talk about is the psychology of humiliation. We are in a period, I talk about this a lot, a protracted period of humiliation, degradation, being renamed, being called, and we've all heard it, vulva havers and Black birthing bodies and clitoris havers and womb havers, and unbelievable to me that any American man could even think to come up and use the term breeder after the history of this nation, the blood on the hands of the history of this nation, and through the Caribbean and through all of the Americas, how you could even come back to think you could use the term breeder. So these are terms that expand and humiliate, intentionally humiliate, eventually silence women from speaking up and maybe even saying, well, this is the way it is. I have to, you know, I guess I have to say menstruator if I'm going to be inclusive, or I have to use the term people with the capacity to give birth if I'm going to be considered inclusive, or birthing body in order to be inclusive. We see that corporations have been captured and women's organizations have been captured, from the Women's Law Center to doula to midwifery to nursing, OBGYN, anything that touches the woman has been, and pardon the pun, penetrated by this ideology to degrade and tear down the psyche of the woman. And I'll give an example in Canada. Um, um, there's a man who raped infants, and he likes to wear diapers. We know. And he was moved into the mother baby unit of a woman's prison after claiming to be transgender. Okay. So this is, when you look at things like this is not a coincidence. There's no coincidences like that, where you are a rapist of babies, you fetishize in wearing a diaper, you want people to see you in that diaper, and then, oops, oh, what a coincidence, we moved you into the mother baby unit after you self-ID, saying that you feel like a woman or infant girl or something to that effect. Those are not coincidences. There's other places that this individual could have been placed, and it's an act of humiliation. It's an act of tearing women down, and it's an act of saying, hey, culture, whatever culture, wherever you are, Canada, Australia, United States, UK, can't do anything about it because we've infiltrated your government system and we put this law in place, and that's that. And we're going to proceed to stripping you and dismantling you and degrading you and humiliating you until you fully submit. So this is an example. These are not coincidences that they put a man like this in the mother baby unit after making such a claim. And then and then I'm gonna I really wanted you to see that history, to hear about the psychology of that this has been done before, and it's not new. And being informed of our history lets us know where we are, and to understand that a lot of this is humiliation and degradation, and then some of it is, you know, medical experimentation with these hysterectomies, and God only knows what's being used with aborted tissue of these women that have no voice. And for how long has this been going on? We tend to not, we, not meaning anybody on this call, but society, oh, they're prisoners, oh, they committed crimes, etc. But the reality is, if one group of women get pulled down, all of us have been pulled down from wherever we were a low notch. Then you add sports, then you add private spaces, then you have laws that could put you in prison for speaking up and using certain terms. You're talking about a whole resettlement and pulling down of women as a sex class, period. You could be the richest woman, the poorest woman, whatever race, whatever political affiliation, all women end up being pulled down. And the last thing in terms of this formal part of my presentation is California. And I just have to bring it back to AMIE now to really dive into California. I had an opportunity to meet many women who were incarcerated under AMIE's leadership. They all worked very hard, and just really waking up to what's happening to women. And I won't name names, but I want to share with you that when she came out, she went to organizations and learned the hard way that they were not interested in helping. And at that time, didn't realize the powerful control that this ideology has over the United States in general. It's more than gender ideology. It's a whole dismantling of multiple systems that we're experiencing at the same time. So I had an opportunity also to meet Tomi Ikia, and it's just wonderful to have met her. Very, very sad under the circumstances, and all of the women are really suffering, and there are a lot of women that are working and protesting and trying, pushing behind. Once we all, quote unquote, discovered AMIE, now it's becoming more and more widespread awareness throughout the United States. Is wonderful. And I'll pass it to Amy so that we can continue.
Yeah, Amy, so since we didn't start recording when we were supposed to, if you wouldn't mind, based on popular demand here on the chat, that you speak briefly about what you said before and maybe address some of what Suzanne said. Amy again is AMIE ICHKAWA, is a formerly incarcerated person and a founding member and executive director of Women to Women, which advocates for women in prison nationwide. Amy?
Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you, Dr. Suzanne. I'm going to give a brief recap. So the history of these abuses and this total disregard for women's well-being and, the lack of societal value that they have has been in practice for a long, long time. I started diving deep into these rabbit holes during COVID lockdown. I just thought I would read everything I could find, and I found the most disturbing information. It started with stumbling across the Nazi eugenics agenda that's really came to fruition in California. Unfortunately, California has a very dark history of eugenics, and they're actually the ones who there were California eugenicists who traveled to Germany during World War II to show the Nazis how to use the Zyklon B, because we had gas chambers that were being used for eugenic purposes. That was during the same time where there was an overwhelming number of people who were getting sterilized, castrated, because they were deemed as, the undesirables, and they wanted to, rid the world of those and make sure they didn't get to reproduce. So this really continued. The Human Betterment Foundation and the American Eugenics Society eventually morphed into the Department of Corrections, or actually the state hospitals. And then when so many of those were closed, it just, passed over to the Department of Corrections. So during the time that I was in prison, I noticed that there were a lot of people, a lot of women that were going in for, ovarian cysts, a different kind of, gyno issues. And I thought it was just unusual that there were such a concentrated number of women experiencing this. Not just that, but thyroid cancer, all kinds of cancers. And, I learned about that later. The arsenic level in the water there is 2,029 times higher than it's supposed to be. Women are told that the cure-all for their issues would be a hysterectomy. There wasn't really informed consent, because some women probably still don't know. Some didn't know until they were paroled. But this doctor, Dr. Heinrich, he was performing or ordering for hundreds of women to be sterilized through unnecessary hysterectomies. I do have power of attorney, financial power of attorney over one of the survivors, and I opened up the compensation check, and it was extremely disturbing and made me feel, my heart broke, because this is what these women's reproductive system is worth, $35,000, and that's all. They took $1 million out of the settlement from Newsom to put plaques up in front of the Department of Correction headquarters that, give honor to the reproductive systems of those who lost them. I'm pretty sure that $1 million would have been better used for the survivors, but that's the way it is. I think the organization that assisted with the processing of those applications got a few million as well, because a lot of organizations capitalize off of the disparity of these women's, including our own peers. So eventually, during this whole creation of the gender situation we're in, experimentation is ground zero in the prison. They've been giving women testosterone for a while, even when I was in prison in 2012 or 13, when they were combining VSPW and CCWF into one facility because they were making the VSPW prison into a men's protective custody prison, which is where, you know, the men should be transferred to now. But they smashed us all together, and there was a woman who'd been on testosterone for a long time that came over, and I was freaking out, like, there's a man on the yard. So they've been doing this for quite some time. Now it's commonplace because if you're male presenting, or if you're a butch or even slightly studdish, they're going to tell you that you're born in the wrong body and that you're a man and you need to get on testosterone. So this is the continued sterilization, even after they got caught for the hysterectomies. It doesn't stop. And it goes even deeper. Everyone is, not everyone, but a lot of people are currently on Suboxone. I'm sure years later, we're going to find out that this does have something to, it'll have an impact on fertility, because they don't do anything without an agenda there. People who never even had an opioid addiction are now addicted to Suboxone. And it just shows how demented our state is, because California was in a lawsuit against the makers of Suboxone for a scheme to overprescribe it to make money. But now, you know, since they've gotten a settlement, they're still going to push it like, you know, crack dealers in the 80s inside the prison system. But this is where we are, and this continues. It just keeps getting worse. I can't imagine what's next. But after the condom dispensers were installed on Super Bowl Sunday, I just thought it's time to really make the best out of this pivotal time. It's almost election season, and this is the best time to get this out there to use however people can use it. I'll give it to whoever. This information needs to be at the forefront, and it's really a non-partisan issue. Every candidate and every politician should be concerned about the fact that women in prison are being abused and erased and coerced, and it's not something that I would wish on any of us, or that any of us would be able to survive. So there is an urgency to make this end, because if we stop it, you know, then we really stop it. If we don't, this is sealing our fate, because once they finish the science project inside the prison system, it will begin, it already has begun implementation. But we have to stop it. We stop it inside. And if we work in a encirclement pattern where we get the women inside to start fighting, and then we fight in, it'll be that much easier. But things like this are very encouraging. I got several messages this morning saying, go get them. You know, they're rooting for us as much as we're rooting for them. So this is very special. Woman time is important. For years, I thought that I just wanted to go back to prison, but I really just missed woman time. As corny as that sounds, it is very important, because this is what they want to take from us. They can't have it, so they want to take it and make sure that we don't have it either.
Thank you, Amy.
Very welcome.
We are ready to have discussion. Let me start with a question myself. I have heard about the epidemic of male guards attacking women in prison. How does this fit in with that problem?
There's definitely a culture of licentiousness among correctional staff. There's also, I mean, it's an abuse of power all the way around. Never will I condone any sexual contact between, you know, a correctional staff and any custodies. That's totally unacceptable. There are assaults. There's going to be assaults. There's also a large amount of consensual sex that goes on. There's a lot of business deals that happen. You know, I'm going to do this and you're going to bring me dope. You're going to bring me a phone. Those kind of things happen, which are unacceptable. But imagine those are the people that are supposed to protect you, and they're doing the same things to you as the people you have to lock in with all the time. So there's just no end. This is a horrible cycle that doesn't end, and they're the losers every time. And there's people who are trying to convince them that this is normal, this is fine. Not the stuff with the staff, but that's been publicized a lot, but it's also something that can be capitalized off of a lot. It can have a lot of financial gain because there's settlements that are going to come from these large lawsuits. But it's time to bring attention to it and for these staff to get it together, because they know when they sign on, they cannot do this, that they will risk losing their jobs, and they will be penalized, and they still do it. So it's time for them to pay the piper.
And Naomi Akers would like to speak. She's a formerly incarcerated person.
Sure, Naomi. And then I see Pacifica has her hand up after that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. I'm fully in support of what Amy is doing. And I'm a formerly incarcerated person. I've spent 6 years as a ward of the state, 3 years as a juvenile. And I can attest that there's unfortunately a perverted, sick sort of sex agenda and twisted agenda that happens in lockdown settings. And I have been sexually abused and or assaulted in every facility, and have been assaulted by law enforcement. So this is just horrible what's happening. I've had a come to Jesus sort of experience with this because in the 90s, I'm a former sex worker, and also had a lot of experiences there, but also I was the executive director of the St. James Infirmary for 7 years, which was an occupational health and safety clinic in San Francisco. And we had a gender transitioning program there. It was called Stride. You can read all about this online. But what I really saw happening, so in the 90s, I supported a woman who sued the San Francisco Sheriff's Department for an illegal gender search, and her name was Victoria Schneider, and you can look that case up. And in that case, this person had a vagina, and also her crimes were prostitution. And it's complicated because under the law, prostitution crimes can be labeled as sex offender charges. And so that really blurs that whole sex offender terminology, because a prostitute who gave a blowjob to a guy in a car and a man who rapes babies in diapers can both get the same class of sex offender under this lens that enforcement has. Yeah, so Victoria, I felt like should not have, she was in a women's side, and I support that. But come to late, what has happened is the rise of the gender non-binary, gender fluid identity. And there's standards of care that guide all of these labels, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of issues. It's such a big topic, and I feel like the sex worker clinic in some ways and the community was used as a way to the rise of the gender fluid non-binary in order to keep your penis so you could still do sex work and then be a sex worker who should be also in women's spaces. And this is where it got really blurry. And you could do your homework. There's a lot to talk about what happened under the standards of care version 6 and then 7. And then what happened 7 version 8 under lockdowns. And you could read the WPATH files to find out more about how puberty blockers for unconsenting minors were introduced. So these lockdown facilities, women, we have to fight naked combat. You're forced to have the view of everyone. So to be housed with men who still have cock and balls, and for that not to be explicitly stated, for vulnerable vaginas is just an absolute human rights violation. Trans rights need to be balanced rights. I think in prisons, in lockdown settings, like what PREA, which is the Prison Rape Elimination Act under Obama, that was supposed to help stop rape for trans, but that somehow is okay for women to be forced to be housed with these violent sex offenders. That's the twist. So what's happening in some of these organizations is that the members don't understand the law. Some of the members are even being told that they don't get to have an opinion. I have been asking politely with an organization that I have worked with since 2005. When I did an oral health assessment of pregnant prisoners, and because the prison doesn't provide preventative or restorative oral health care, and the women had to get their teeth pulled to go be with their children, we were interviewing women, and one woman had 18 of her teeth pulled to be with the women. So when Amy and Dr. Verling, thank you so much. When you're talking about the procedures, the elective cosmetic procedures that the male prisoners are getting, while women prisoners are being denied some of the most fundamental basics like oral health care, it's really an injustice. And I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you, Naomi. Pacifica, did you want to speak? You have your hand up. And you're on mute.
No, she's had her hand up for a while.
All right,
Yeah.
okay. Well, let's see if there's anybody. Does anybody else want to say
Okay.
something or ask questions, or do some of the speakers want to respond?
My question, I have a couple of questions. One has to do with Dana Rivers. When he was in the county place in Livermore, I was told that he was in a special room or space or something. He wasn't in with the women that are there. I just don't know if that's the truth, and or is he in a special place of the women's place, or do we know?
Actually, Tamikia has interviewed one of the ladies who's in county jail with Rivers during that long period of fighting that case for a really long time. And from what I understand, they were in a direct vicinity of each other, because this woman said that Rivers was doing exercises like burpees and jumping up and down off of tables, getting fit while going to court in a wheelchair. So
Yeah.
she was privy to all of that. And currently Rivers is in women's general population, actually.
He is
in the same, on the same yard as TJ, actually.
in the same cell.
No, they have units. There's 4 units on a yard. Each unit has 4 hallways, and I think 8 rooms a piece, or there's 32 rooms, and there's 8 people in each room.
In one room. Yeah. The other question has to do with the pregnancies. Are these aborted?
Last year there were 2 recorded abortions. This year, I don't have the number yet. That's a good reminder, though. There's 16, allegedly 16. This is the report that was given from the prison. 16 pregnant women in CIW. There was one in CCWF, but they have to transfer everyone who gets pregnant to the lower security prison down south. But that's a lot. I'm actually going to follow up on that, because that's incredibly disturbing. I hope they understand that their condom dispensers are clearly not working. And that I would like to know what their plan is to do with these children. We're under the impression that someone did actually have a baby. That's what we're being told, but I don't have the numbers for that yet.
And what did they do with those?
Oh,
Sorry.
well, well, no problem. The baby has to be adopted out. They have to set up an adoption. There's posters in the medical units that say, should you become pregnant, if you're a person who can become pregnant while in custody, your options are abortion, Plan B, or connection with a social worker to start the adoption process.
Right. And if not adopted, if no one adopts the baby, well, the first thing that's going to happen is the baby goes into foster care. So
Yeah.
I've been tracking down the New Jersey women to see if they actually did, those pregnancies actually did end in a live birth, because then now you're talking about babies born into a life of motherlessness and fatherlessness, and into a life, you could live out your life in foster care. It's very possible if no one
Yeah.
steps
Well,
up
until you're 18,
until you're 18, and then,
and then,
Then you go to prison.
then you
Yeah.
go to prison. I was going to say that, homelessness and then prison. So, I just wanted to just say something really quickly. California is really testing the limits. You see Dana Rivers was able to do everything just out in the open, no problem. Gascon, the district attorney in Los Angeles, is already precedent for a 27-year-old man being placed in a girls' juvenile detention facility. And he was there for a while. And and he committed several crimes against children, and he was able to get away with it. So even though women were, some women were screaming, and really, everybody was calling to fight against this, they put a man in technically a child's facility, so a girl's juvenile detention facility, and they said, oh, it's okay, he's separate from the girls. She is housed separate from the younger girls, from the little girls. So it's nothing to worry about. See, so we are groomed like this, where more and more and more steps are taken, and it's done, sometimes slowly, softly, quietly, secretly, surreptitiously. But then an excuse comes up. Oh, no, he was separate. When who thinks that it's okay for a man to be in a girl's facility? But that precedent has already been set, and this is the slow encroachment that we experience.
And
I
can
just wanted to make
piggyback?
sure everybody, everyone knew who Dana Rivers is. That he killed a lesbian couple in Oakland and their, I guess, adult son, in the most gruesome murder, and then try to cover his tracks by, I think, setting the house on fire. I mean, it's really, really brutal murder. And I think he had been involved in protesting the Michigan Women's Festival. I believe I'm remembering correctly. So he was one of the most gruesome murderers and women haters being put in women's prisons. It's really, really shocking. So, okay, Amy, I'm sorry.
I was just going to add to that Hannah Tubbs situation that Dr. Suzanne was just speaking on. Hannah Tubbs' feelings were paramount over everyone's safety and well-being. And Hannah Tubbs is also doing time now for bashing someone's brains in with a rock in a homeless camp in Kern County, I think, somewhere up north. And this person got 15 years for a crime that most people would get life or life without for. As a matter of fact, I know a woman who got life without for that crime. So this Tubbs person is going to be headed to women's prison soon. And I'm very interested to know how they got 15 years for bashing someone's brains in with a rock. This is completely unacceptable and unheard of. I'm all for people not having to do time, but if you've done the crime and it's heinous, it has to be a standard that everyone's held accountable to. It can't just be that there's a two-tier justice system for trans-identified individuals. Currently in the prison, there are no consequences for anything that they do, really. If you choke someone out in the honor dorm, you're going to get moved to another honor dorm. If you rape someone, you're going to go to administrative segregation and then be released into general population again. So this is definitely a crazy precedent that's being set, and it's female erasure all the way around.
There any other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any, but there's a lot to talk about here. I just wanted to
Why
ask,
isn't Anne? Why isn't this stuff really covered in the media?
There's a moratorium, there's a media blackout on this. None of the local or mainstream stations will cover it. They don't want to touch it. They don't really want anything to do with it. In the very beginning, I contacted everyone I could think of, from, Ellen DeGeneres to the local news in Chowchilla. It's kind of eerie how far this and deep the silence goes on this. And the only outlets that will really give it any play are either feminist or conservative.
What do they say when you bring a story to them? What's their excuse, or or they just ignore you?
Just ignore me for the most part, or some people will say, we'll get back to you. But it's usually just being ignored.
Joey, do you have your hand up?
I was gonna say,
Oh, sure.
if you were to do a Google search on incarcerated women, etc., all of the articles, all of the coverage in mainstream media says that trans women are being discriminated against by not allowing them to go into women's prisons, and that they are abused and violated and beaten up and raped in men's prison. That's the coverage from mainstream media, and constantly painting them as if they're these very vulnerable people that's being harmed. And then of course, feminists and folks that are a little bit more conservative goes, well, what about the woman? You can't, how are women to be used as comfort animal, almost like a teddy bear, a tool to be used to ease the pain of gender dysphoria or body dysmorphia, or a safe space away from the violence of men in prison. That's literally how women are being used, and I hope the language wasn't too painful to hear. So anyway.
Joey?
Yeah, I was going to say to whoever brought up about why isn't there more coverage in mainstream? So the murders happened right here in my area, around in Oakland, California. When they happened, there were about 4 of us lesbians here going, holy shit, we gotta protest, we gotta do, whatever, right? I hooked up with, there was one article that popped out of a mainstream paper. That was kind of it at first. I contacted that guy. I actually met him. I saw him at the courthouse, and he spoke to me very off record. And he said, look, I've been told not to write about this anymore. There is a media blackout, but they're not going to tell the public. I said, now, why do you think that is? He said, I don't know, because I think because of the transgender thing they're trying to push, like we're all supposed to accept it. This is 2016. Okay, this is an agenda. This is from every system, from what Suzanne has said, from what Amy's talking about. This isn't just incarceration. This isn't just the medical industry. This is education. This is the military. This is everything. This is why Governor Newsom is where he is and could well be our next president, while everybody's squawking about, who's going to go and all this. To know that there was a media blackout at that time in 2016, and to have a reporter tell me, I don't know, I guess it's because he heard that. He already heard that. And there were only like the very first publication to actually come out was a teeny tiny blog that turned on a lot of people a long time ago. It doesn't exist anymore. And it was a woman who used a fake name, Gallus Mag. And she put out a blog called gendertrender.com or whatever. It got it got messed with. It definitely got messed with. But I looked at that and went, oh my God, we couldn't believe this is a woman who lived on the East Coast. She had details from here in Oakland and the family. She had all this stuff. She put way more details than we ever saw, you know, in the major publications. Even when I was at the courthouse and went through there, for anybody over 50 years old, would it be now, the microfiche? They had stuff at the courthouse back in 2016, 17. When I got a hold of being able to visually see those records, they would not allow any printouts. You couldn't take pictures, you know, nothing. I won't describe what I read because the details are so fucking gruesome. He didn't just set fire to the garage or the house. So I'm going to skip the gross details, and I put the article in that I wrote that came out last year in a Substack called The Distance, put out by Gay and Lesbian United at the time. And they asked for my piece. And I went to Rivers' the last two court sessions that he was in, and was sitting literally like maybe barely 50 feet away. And I was scared myself. There's a friend sitting next to me. This is just an aside, and this is very notable. There's two things that happened in those last couple of days that Dana Rivers was in the courtroom. One was that the first day I went in, it was all of this testimony that the prosecuting attorney, she cross-examined a woman, a lesbian. She's the one, Sandra, which I can't remember her last name right now. I have it written down. She was Dana Rivers' like really, really good friend. She had a women's motorcycle group, and she's the one that brought Dana Rivers in to let him continue, you know, carrying out his fetish and his whole delusion that he was a woman. They brought him into the motorcycle group. And I know I've talked to Amy about this, the collusion, what the prosecuting attorney brought up with this lesbian, I want to say Cassandra, Sandra something, Latina last name. She was like old school butch, very bar, really shut down, very defensive, and really gave a description that sounded exactly like this was a hit. This motorcycle group, they would do anything to protect the group, to protect the sanctity of whatever, you know, had gone on in the group. Amy, you quite well know yourself about people keeping secrets. And if anybody broke a secret of a group, you know, they're going to get murdered, whatever. This woman sat up there. She scared the shit out of me, just listening to her and watching her, and the coldness that came from her, as if it was the fault of the two women that were murdered. And even Dana himself had said it was personal. Yeah, he's personal. He stabbed one of the women 40 times just in the face. You don't do that just to kill somebody. The lesbian publication, that blog site that doesn't exist anymore, Gender Trender, said, and they weren't the only ones, he wanted to be lovers or something had happened between him and the woman. And he was rejected. They had his motorcycle, supposedly his motorcycle, in the garage. He wanted his motorcycle back. That's what he told the cops when they found him with blood all over. The house is on fire. And he says, oh, I know I did something bad. It's like details like this, you know? So anyway, it's just as the judge had said. The judge said, I have never, when he said he was guilty, nothing about him faking being a woman. I don't even recall the word transgender hardly coming up. It was just so clear this was a man. And I'm looking at the jury, and they're looking at him like, okay, what the hell's going on here? Because he's got huge tits. He's in his 60s now. So these breasts are like sagging. And he's wearing, in the courtroom, all the time when I saw him, a kind of a tightly fit, not super, but you know how a knit sweater clings to our bodies, like no matter what. He had his right nipple was erect the entire time and like aimed at the jury. So there's this man who really, for the most part, just looked like a freaky old guy that had been on estrogen for a really long time. But there's that fetish thing too of there's a whole thing around body parts and having an erect nipple like that. I'm like, oh my God, nobody wrote about it. Kara Dansky had a young woman in the courtroom who was sending notes every day. She was there reporting. When I talked to her later, I said, did you see that, right? She says, what? No, I didn't notice. And me and my friend Renee are like, oh my God, this guy's living his fetish out right here in the courtroom in front of the jury. And he turned around and we locked eyes for a very short period of time. That's what I talk about in the article. And he looked at then my friend Renee. We were like in a death stare, the three of us, for a minute until the judge called and he turned his head away. I had to go to the bathroom later, and that woman Sandra and I were alone in the basement women's bathroom. And I swear, I was like, I couldn't hold my pee anymore, but I felt like I was all dried up, like, I better get out of here. Well, I didn't go running out of there. But that woman doesn't live that far from me. This is somebody, the moment he went into jail, she brought the rest of the women from the motorcycle group to come and visit him, to pay him honor. Now, Amy, doesn't that sound like if they're going to go to pay respect to him after he's been committed to prison for killing, and they're coming to respect him, does that not sound like they wanted this to happen?
And like they need a gang enhancement because you got to serve those 10 years before you start your life sentence, like everybody else who does things for the betterment of a street gang or organized crime family.
Wow.
But two-tier justice system again. And you're right, there was never any mention of this being a biological man at any point. And, you know, going into prison had the same attitude. Actually, as soon as Dana got to receiving, usually there's like a 6-week period, if not longer, for you to process to go to your permanent housing, but it was almost instant. I think he got there and a couple of days later was over the wall and into a regular general population unit.
Wow. Pacifica, did you have your hand raised again, or was that you forgot to lower?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I wanted to say that my daughter is a cousin of one of the nieces. I can't remember which one, and she's not actually a blood niece, but the family, that's the way the family talks. And so this happened, let's see, were they both at Berkeley High? I can't quite remember if they were both there, but the whole family knew about what was going on here. I mean, I don't know if they knew about the last part of it, but the fact about the motorcycle gang. And as I understand it, I was in the court for part of the time where the judge, the real judge was talking about her all the time. And he asked everybody to do that. So he had quite a bit of power in that situation. And there were the way that Missy is the child's name. Oh, well, she's a grown-up woman now, but to hear her talk about what the whole family knew before the murder, before the fire, before all the stuff about as I understand it, the motorcycle was hers being, I can't remember either one of their names, sorry. But the motorcycle was
Patricia Wright.
Yes, Patricia and
I forget her name right now, but it's not Patricia, but it is the other one.
What'd you say? Charlotte was the
Charlotte,
other one.
that's it.
Yeah.
Charlotte supposedly had some kind of something going with, I don't know what, with Dana prior to that. Patricia was not happy with.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's just, the learning about what happened before this happened was, it's like before what's happening there. I mean, the babies that are coming out of this situation, it's the same kind of sterilization and isolation. I just wanted to bring that in because the family, pretty big family. Missy now lives in Florida and she's doing fine, and she was glad to hear the end of it, but like the end of it, it's not really the end of it. He's still there and he's now has whatever he wants to do with the women that are there too. So that's.
Yes,
my
I had
addition
a
to this.
question that, I guess to Amy about the women who are in prison and how many of them have histories of male violence in their lives that may, in some cases at least, or many cases, be associated with their crime that they're in prison for.
Yeah.
Well, the percentage of women who've been battered and beaten in California prisons is 92%. I want to say, I just read it, 72% that have survived some form of sexual abuse. But in my personal experience, I think it's closer to 100%,
Yeah.
to be honest. And there's a large number of women. Everyone who I met while I was in prison, story started with, so there was this guy, or my husband, or my dad, or this man. Everyone's story overwhelmingly started with that, including my own. So just to be in the same kind of situation,
Yeah.
it throws people in a tailspin. There's a woman we just got a message from, and she said, prison was my only safe place. As crazy as it sounds, this was my safe place. This is where my abusers couldn't get me. And she had been gang raped by the Hells Angels when she was a little girl. And she got a roommate one day and he looked exactly like her attackers. And come to find out, he's actually from the same small town in San Diego as she's from. And he was very, very proud to let her know that he very well could have been there when that was happening to her. And he's the same person who assaulted 3 women. And the end result was him getting moved into the honor dorm with his girlfriend. So that's, and this impacts every woman in there, even if you're not the one who's getting hit or raped or, having an abusive relationship with one of these guys. It's affecting you because you see it, you hear it, you smell it, you even if it's second, third, fourth hand information, it's still going to impact you all the way to your core. It messes me up, and I'm out here. There's days where some of us, I have 2 partners, and some days where all we can do, we spend at least half the day crying because it's overwhelming to know that this is the way it is, that there's women in there screaming and nobody will hear, and that there's organizations that go in and tell them that they're tripping.
Yeah.
And that really sucks too. But I actually, I have a letter from, or a statement from Tamikia Johnson. Is it okay if I read it? So Tamikia Johnson is a friend of ours. She's currently serving a life sentence for the accidental death of her husband. She's also a former highway patrol officer. So she's in a lot of situations a little smarter than the people who are the correctional officers. So they're a little bit extra mean to her. And plus she's very outspoken. So she wrote this for you guys. Thank you for taking the time to care about women in prison being forcibly housed with men who are sex offenders convicted of murder, rape, serial rape, forced oral copulation on a woman, kidnapping women, and other far more violent crimes than what the average woman is serving time for. Crimes committed by men are not commensurate to those committed by women. As studies show, men have much higher propensity for violence. One gigantic, scary-looking man housed in CCWF who stalked and harassed me nearly 3 years, raped a man, several men, and murdered a man, several men, in men's prison. He is bound cell to cell, continuing to bully and peep at women in the shower and on the toilet. One man named Carol is alleged to be responsible for 3 pregnancies. He's also the one that beat the woman until she miscarried. For-profit, nonprofit organizations like CCWP, Sister Warriors, Restorative Media, ARC, and Survived and Punished are financially gaining off of our plight while simultaneously forcing or coercing female victims to refer to men as women in our spaces. Formerly incarcerated women and men from CCWF and San Quentin are on the hunt to collect paychecks from lucrative blood money, camouflaged as funding, creating pop-ups, or worm their way into organizations only to forget where they came from. These folks are claiming to be pro-survivor, publicly shaming correctional officers for sexual relations with incarcerated women, but won't point out the fact that male inmates have more access to our bodies than the correctional officers. There have been more rapes by SB 132 male inmates upon the incarcerated women in the 4 years than correctional officer Rodriguez committed in 22 years. Shame on him too. He ain't the only culprit. These formerly incarcerated groomers and caterers to the male penis and inmate blues in women's prisons need to be back in prison, while the real female activists who are blowing the whistle enjoy the freedom betrayers graciously disrespect. Thank you again for caring about cruel and unusual punishment, the male takeover of our women's prisons. From Tamikia.
Thank you so much. That was really powerful. And thank her for speaking up like that. So I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. So I think we should just have closing statements. Want to start with Suzanne and then go back to Amy.
Well, I just want to say, just thankful that we're all here, that FIST and everyone who signed up is here and invested and understand the importance of what's going on in regards to, incarcerated women and the profound amount of violation that they are experiencing, and we are vicariously. And I just want to reaffirm what I said earlier, and also Joey Bright mentioned it. We are experiencing a dismantling of multiple systems in our nation, in our culture at the same time. It's like a multi-pronged attack between K through 12 education, our higher education, corporate structures, what's happening in the job market, and also the dismantling.
De vacaciones por ser mañana
You need to unmute yourself if you're not speaking.
Oh, gracias.
I'm sorry.
Gracias.
Sorry, Suzanne.
Okay, sorry. So I just wanted to just say that there is a bigger picture. At this point, I just say it's Womanhood Incorporated or Womanhood Inc. That's being dismantled and chopped up like a hedge fund. We still have things coming out in the future for women. Prostitution is coming, and a push for red light districts that's coming. It's not here. And reproductive technology. So there's a couple more hammers to come down, and also finally to understand that anything, the gender industrial complex is essentially a multi-billion-dollar business. So thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Amy, do you have a few more comments to end us?
Yes, I really want to thank you ladies for your time. This has been very well spent. I appreciate your attention and your concern for this issue. That's the hill that I'll die on if I have to. I knew this was going to be a heavy load when I picked it up, and I knew we were going to be up against, well, I didn't know it was going to be this big. Let me tell the truth. I didn't know it was going to be this big, but that's okay. I wouldn't change the position I'm in or the decisions that I've made for anything. I wouldn't even go back and change the fact that I did 5 years in prison at all, because I wouldn't know the people I know, and I wouldn't have the treasures that I have that are my friends inside if I hadn't have gone. This is the way it was supposed to be, and this is the fight we're supposed to fight. So what I want to encourage people to do is continue to have uncomfortable conversations. There's we're just one uncomfortable conversation away from breaking through this and getting this into the right ears in front of the right people that are going to help us reverse this. I know it's awkward. It's kind of a weird conversation to have. Nobody really wants to talk about this. It's ugly and it's very unpleasant. People like to kind of sweep ugly, unpleasant things under the rug, and we can't do that, because if we do that, yes, please send stamps, Joey. if we don't remedy this, we're going to seal our fate. And I don't want this for anybody out here, because it is so horrible. What I always say as to give an example of how this is, when I think about what's happening to them, I just imagine them looking down at their hands and their arms and their feet and their legs, and things are just erasing. As they stand and breathe, they're being erased. And it's happening to us as well, but these women are really on the front lines, and we've got to match them and be on the front lines on the outside. And partnership and putting all of the disagreements on the back burner until we get over this hill is going to be really vital to our continued existence, because they're really trying to get rid of us. And please send stamps if you can. We always need stamps. They're very expensive now. I can't believe how expensive they are.
And this is why I love Amy. She's like, I just need stamps. I just need envelopes. I just need a little ask, and it's serious. She needs so much more, and she said stamps. I just love that.
I see a question in the chat. What is the most effective way that those of us on the outside of prison can help or can do?
Have these talks, have these uncomfortable talks. We always need, well, we don't always, but we need advice. We need, we would love a system, a record keeping system. We would really, we really need like a social work platform that we can keep records on. We don't know how to build that, and we don't want to break our heads trying to figure out how to reinvent the wheel. Those kind of ideas, or access to those kind of resources, or the ability to build such, would be incredibly helpful, because we have to be able to track how much time we invest in all this, and we have to have a logical way to keep everything we're doing in one place. And our handwritten notes and our 5,000 tabs open on our laptops is not cutting the mustard right now. And Liz just added in the comments too, there's our mailing address is on the website. It's we have two, well, you can visit the website, it'll explain everything, but sending us stamps, the little notes we get from women who are sending little words of encouragement are very wonderful too. They definitely keep us sustained, and they're much appreciated. And just sharing your time with us is incredibly helpful. It's very good to be able to do this, because if everybody just talks to one person after this, that's going to make a difference. It's going to make some headway in getting to where we need to be to ensure the safety of incarcerated women.
Amy, I'm not sure if you said this or not, but several people have asked on the chat about how to send, how to correspond, I think, pretty much with the women that are incarcerated. Have you gone over that?
I haven't. I usually shy away from that, because I know it sounds gatekeeperish. Well, it is. I am a gatekeeper. I have to protect everyone's feelings, including yours. A lot of these women are unfortunately going to be in there for a long time, and some of them are going to die in there. So it's a big commitment. If you're going to start writing somebody and be friends, it's a lot of responsibility, because these women have been abandoned their whole lives. So to get a pen pal who, writes you a couple letters and then has to live their life, it's
I see, sure.
demoralizing. So it's a big commitment. That's why I tell people, you got to think about it for a while, because it's okay to not want to do this every week or it's normal to not want to, make a lifetime commitment, but in some cases that's what it's going to be. So just think about it. And then if it's really on your heart, just call the number on the website. It's my cell phone. We'll take it
Okay.
from there.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna end with an invitation for everyone to attend our FIST conference that's coming up July 5th to 7th in the San Diego area. And check our website, feministstruggle.org, where you can sign up. You can join FIST, and you can also sign up to attend the conference. Amy will be appearing at the conference with Hella Kerner, I think her name is, from Vancouver Rape Relief on the issue of women's spaces. Suzanne is also going to have a workshop. Do you want to say what it is again?
That's terrible. My creativity, I was like, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. I think just broadly, I want to talk about this new the psychological forces and this under this new hegemony that we're under. We're just not aware of it, and how we're being pressed into submitting into it, and then fighting and aligning with all sorts of people where we have the same focus and the same agenda. I always say, then we could go back to fighting the way we used to fight each other. But for now, we need some alignment and some unity, but we need to understand the framework and the system that we are now under. So
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to Amy and Susanna. This was really great, and everyone who participated. And I hope to see you in San Diego in July. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.